Now Starbucks is $15.29. Now $17, $14. The price has definitely gone up for all the coffees.
President Trump are increasing tensions with two U.S. trade partners. As of today, 50% tariffs are officially in effect for Brazil.
Brazil, as an example, has been.
President Trump is using the economy as a political weapon. He's been saying that tariffs are about leveling the playing field.
We can't grow coffee here. There's only two states that can grow coffee. Well, two places in the U.S. that grows coffee. One of them is our territory, Puerto Rico, and the other is Hawaii.
Then when you add tariffs, possibly, on top of that, then, your cup of coffee may double.
These same people are just fine with paying these tariffs for no fucking reason. There's no reason for this. There's no reason that I should be paying $16.23 for a cheap ass can of coffee. There's no reason for it. He's making it up. Grow up. My God. Figure it out, because you're losing your joys every day. Every day. You're losing a right. You're losing something that brings you joy. You're losing a relationship. You're losing a job. You're losing neighbors. When will you get sick of all the losing?
Raising import taxes to the highest level since the Great Depression. The Yale Budget Lab estimates the new tariffs will cost the average U.S. household $2,400.
What happens when the world's biggest coffee grower shuts the tap on your morning cup? Who pays when politics meets your latte? And can Canada or China quietly steal America's coffee supply? Today, the price of your coffee just became a political story. In 2025, coffee hit multi-decade highs. Arabica futures spiked to $4.41 a pound. And then, Washington hit Brazil with a 50% tariff on August 1st. Brazil supplies roughly 8 million 60-kilogram bags a year to the U.S., about 1/3 of our beans. When a giant like that gets taxed half its value at the border, buyers react fast, shipments get delayed, contracts are pushed out, and roasters warn of big price hikes.
And Donald Trump's tariff regime is now officially in place. He has been celebrating since late last night. Just before midnight, he posted that billions of dollars, quote, largely from countries that have taken advantage of the United States for many years, will start flowing into the United States. Then just after midnight, he posted billions of dollars in tariffs are now flowing into the United States of America.
That post lit a fuse across the coffee chain. Importers froze orders, traders rushed to ship early, and some buyers simply canceled. Brazil's exporters reported July shipments down 28.1% year-on-year, with Arabica exports down about 20.6% and Robusta plunging nearly 49%. Those are not small swings. They're red flags.
That minute of calm, that moment of relaxation, is about to get much more expensive in the United States. So now a $10 bag of coffee becomes $15.
Retail prices already jumped. Ground coffee in the U.S. moved from about $7.39 per pound in March to roughly $8.41 per pound by July. The U.S. CPI for coffee rose double digits, plus 11.5% in May and plus 14.5% by July. For daily coffee drinkers, that's real money. A $0.50 more per cup adds up fast.
$14 for 1 pound of coffee? Bullshit.
Trump's 50% Brazil coffee tariff expected to rejig trade, send more beans to China. At around 25 million bags per year, the U.S. is the world's largest coffee consumer. A third of that comes from Brazil through bilateral trade that was worth $4.4 billion in the 12 months ended in June. Brazil warned buyers were postponing shipments to avoid the 50% surcharge. That means pre-shipment finance costs rise. Exporters could lose $10 or more per 60-kilogram bag if they push cargoes back a few months. Some cooperatives fear a domestic glut that will push local farm prices down. A bitter irony after drought-hit harvests.
I mean, we buy a ton of coffee from countries around the world, and we just can't produce coffee in America to supply our business. So when we buy coffee from another country, the cost of that tariff is an additional cost that we have to incur and pass on to our customers through increased prices.
I'm just so happy to be here with Alex and his mom, Ann, who own Smith's here in Eden Prairie. And it's one of the reasons that I called on this administration to exempt small businesses from this tariff war. The chaoticness and the unpredictability make doing business so difficult.
Brazil didn't just sit still, it opened doors to China. Beijing approved hundreds of Brazilian coffee exporters. Reports say dozens of new contracts already route beans eastward. That's a double whammy. U.S. supply shrinks, while Brazil secures alternative buyers.
Bruh, this feels so wrong. $11.49?
$17.49 for one can of coffee. In America. This used to be $11.99 a month and a half ago.
Major roasters and retailers are negotiating price moves. Expect 15 to 35% retail hikes on premium blends. Some grocery brands already shifted list prices.
And under Biden, I was paying $8.92 for 30.5 ounces. Trump takes over, starts this inane, trade war for no reason. It was $9.96 for 25.9 ounces when they raised it. I went to buy coffee this week. It was now, with that same smaller can, $16.23.
Families, cafe owners, and small roasters face real pain. Producers worry about farm incomes if beans pile up. Consumers face higher daily costs. And the U.S. coffee supply chain is now a geopolitics battlefield. Next, I'll explain how Canada and other players are moving in, which brands won't survive, and steps the U.S. can take to avoid a full coffee crisis. Before we jump back in, please hit the like button. We're on a mission to bring together 5,000 curious minds here at Global Insight, and your subscription makes this journey possible. Every click, every new subscriber is a true vote of confidence, and we're deeply grateful for your support. Thank you for helping us grow. Now let's continue. This is where things go off the rails. The cost isn't just a few cents. Yale's budget lab says the new tariff wave will cost the average U.S. household about $2,400 this year. That number helps explain why shoppers and traders are panicking.
All these other coffees that were originally before $8.99.
Just a 12-pack of coffee pods at $12.69.
That small jump? It's part of a much bigger shock. Roasters live on tiny margins. When green bean costs spike and import duties double, the cost gets pushed down the line, all the way to your cart. Traders rush to land Brazilian coffee in the U.S. before Trump's 50% tariff. Traders scrambled to beat the deadline. Some ships had stops canceled mid-voyage, so containers full of Brazilian beans could reach U.S. ports before the tariff kicked in. Others rerouted cargo to ports with looser inspection rules. That kind of last-minute juggling raises freight costs, insurance fees, and customs risk. And exporters and importers absorb big bills just to keep supply moving.
Guess how much this was? Guess. If you guessed below $5, you would be wrong. If you guessed above $7, you would be correct. What? Why are we getting charged almost $10 for a cup of coffee? Things are getting out of hand. I think I just spent $4 on ice, to be honest.
People are feeling it at the cafe. A 50-cent latte hike becomes a $182 annual hit for a daily drinker. That's not a trend. It's a squeeze on bills, comfort, and routine. Small roasters that buy in small lots can't hedge big futures contracts. Big roasters can lock prices for months, but smaller businesses have to pay spot prices that jumped fast. Some chains are absorbing part of the rise to avoid losing customers. Many independents are already trimming staff or raising cup prices. Expect closures if this keeps up.
President Kamala Harris, as you know, is not running for governor of California. She's not going to do it. What do you see in her political future, sir?
Well, she can't speak. She can't talk. She can't do an interview. I thought it was a very strange campaign.
Politics is loud here. It shapes trade in real time. Buyers don't want that uncertainty, so they pause orders. That means cash flow headaches for farmers and co-ops in Brazil who counted on steady exports. Jessica Nunez tweets about 25% tariffs on $30 billion worth of U.S. goods, including coffee. This fight isn't one way. Other countries hit back with tariffs and countermeasures. That pushes global trade into fast rerouting and makes long-term contracts harder to trust. Lenders tighten credit for exporters when contracts get delayed, so borrowing costs rise. For a Brazilian exporter forced to hold beans because a U.S. buyer delays, every extra month can mean tens of dollars in financing fees per bag, and margins vanish.
So I was at a farmer's market with one of my friends, and there was like a coffee truck. And so we're like, oh my gosh, just get coffee there. Their matcha was $7 already. Oat milk was $1.25. And then tip and then tax? We would have been paying for a $10 matcha.
That short clip says everything. Small sellers pass costs straight to customers because they can't absorb big duty jumps or pay sky-high freight. A $1.25 oat milk add-on becomes a tipping point when suppliers get hit by sudden trade fees. Coffee, shoes. Trump's sweeping new tariffs could hike these prices. Coffee drinkers may feel the pinch of new tariffs. The list of country-specific levies includes a 50% tariff on products from Brazil, a major source of imported coffee. The U.S. imported nearly $2 billion worth of coffee from Brazil last year, which amounted to about 20% of all such imported products. Analysts warned this would happen. Tariffs on everyday imports didn't just target big industry players. They cranked up the cost of things we buy every day. Coffee, shoes, even pantry staples face higher prices when trade gets weaponized. When buyers fear surprise duties, they delay orders or try to rush shipments. That creates volatility. Exporters wait, ports get clogged, bankers charge higher fees to cover risk, and roasters lose the ability to plan. For many Brazilian cooperatives, the safest move is find buyers who will pay now, often in Asia or Europe, leaving U.S. roasters scrambling. The government of Canada is imposing 25% tariffs on $30 billion in goods imported from the United States. Trade fights go both ways. Canada's countermeasures force U.S. sellers to rethink markets, and sometimes whole supply chains shift north or to other partners, meaning winners and losers on both sides of the border. Who is winning quietly? Some players are pivoting fast. Big multinational roasters lock long-term contracts and use hedging to soften the blow. Large grocery chains quietly shop for alternate origins, and private label beans to protect margins. Meanwhile, countries that move fast to sign new deals, or that sit outside the tariff web, pick up volumes. For exporters, new buyers in Asia are tempting because they pay up front and accept different specs. Who is losing for real? Small roasters, indie cafes, farmers in drought-hit regions, and mid-size exporters with thin cash reserves. Many of these can't front the cost of delayed payments or pay higher interest when banks tighten credit. That's why some co-ops are asking governments for emergency lines, and why roaster owners are talking layoffs or reduced roasting runs. Practical moves for consumers and small businesses.
Is increasing because of the tariffs that start tomorrow. Here is a little bit of information that might help you. Freeze-dried coffee is not made from Brazilian imported coffee. It is not likely to be immediately impacted by tariffs.
Buy beans with wider origins. Blends with mixed country beans will be cheaper than single-origin Brazilian lots. Support local roasters who pre-bought stock or directly source farmer-owned lots. This keeps money closer to growers. For cafes, consider smaller cup sizes, loyalty discounts, or subscription models to smooth cash flow. Tell your customers why prices changed. People usually stay if you're honest. Choices change fast. Some shoppers will trade down. Some will keep the ritual and pay up. That decision shapes which shops survive. Tariffs were meant to protect industries, but when the U.S. hits non-grown goods like coffee, the pain shows up in grocery aisles and corner cafes. Diplomacy and trade deals can blunt the impact. Exemptions, phased reductions, or quick bilateral talks are the only short-term fixes that stop panic buying and rushed shipments. Farmers in origin countries are resilient but fragile. When buyers hesitate, harvests wait, loans come due, and rural towns feel the stress. The ripple is real and fast. Think about it. A 50% tariff on Brazil's beans can make your latte cost twice as much. Now swap the cafe for a family farm. The same politics that choked coffee shipments just led to China rejecting 1.5 million tons of U.S. corn.
Farmers are so concerned about their farm finances right now, they really just can't catch a break.
It's not just because corn prices are below break even for most. It's the fact input prices are so high.
The U.S. has lost the corn crown. We've been the world's top exporter of corn for just about every single year in history.
China halted orders for U.S. soybeans and corn before tariff escalation. A crushing blow. USDA cancels local food purchasing programs that serve Humboldt's schools, tribes, seniors, and food bank, while supporting ranchers and farmers. Have you heard that China just turned away 1.5 million metric tons of American corn? Do you know why U.S. farmers are watching their silos overflow? And did you see that Canada's corn exports are set to hit 2.5 million metric tons this season, thanks to billion-dollar deals in Japan and South Korea? Welcome to 2025, where old rivals become the new winners in the global corn race. First, picture this. The United States, once the world's top corn exporter, 54.2 million metric tons in 2023-24, now faces a shrinking market. In early 2025, China canceled a massive 1.5 million ton order, pointing to quality concerns and hitting back with retaliatory tariffs. At the same time, low water levels on the Mississippi River slowed barges by 20%, adding 30 cents per bushel in shipping costs. The result? U.S. corn prices plunged to about $3.50 per bushel, down from $6.50 in 2024, while a surplus of 2.5 billion bushels piled up in grain elevators from Iowa to Illinois. As American farmers grapple with unsold stock, some forced to sell tractors and harvesters just to cover bills, Canada quietly seized the moment. In 2024/25, Canadian corn exports are projected at 2.5 million metric tons, up from 1.5 million the year before. Deals with Japan alone account for 800,000 tons, while South Korea snapped up 600,000 tons. None of this is by accident. Canada's use of blockchain traceability now covers 30% of its corn shipments, giving buyers real-time proof of quality and origin. Add a non-GMO premium. 25% of Canada's corn is GMO-free, and you have a winning recipe for markets that demand both consistency and purity. Behind these shifts lie powerful government supports. Canadian farmers benefit from agri-insurance and agri-stability, covering up to 90% of export losses, plus export credit insurance that backs deals worth hundreds of millions. By contrast, U.S. exporters face a 10% blanket tariff on imports, 50% on steel and aluminum, that drive up equipment and fertilizer costs by 15%, and 25% retaliatory duties from key buyers like China. The playing field is anything but level. Rural America feels the pain. Net farm income in the Corn Belt has fallen 30%, shrinking from $150 billion in 2024 to $105 billion this year. In Kansas, the local grain co-op reports 36% more unmatched corn in storage, and in Nebraska, 25% of farms sold equipment to make ends meet. Food aid applications in farming counties are up 40%, as families who once fed the world now struggle to feed themselves. Still, Canada's rail and port network boasts a 95% on-time delivery rate, compared to the U.S. at 80%. Japanese millers praise the zero-delay shipments to Yokohama, while U.S. corn sits in backlog at New Orleans, redirected or held for days. Even billion-dollar contracts with Middle Eastern feed mills now favor Canada, citing supply chain stability over a few dollars saved. This isn't just about corn. It's a warning that policy missteps, tariffs, GMO restrictions, and outdated infrastructure can open doors for competitors. If U.S. farmers don't see swift reforms, Canada and Brazil stand ready to lock up the world's barns. America's Corn Belt, once the envy of every market, now faces an uncertain harvest. Across the Western Hemisphere, America's corn woes deepen. Mexico, once a staunch U.S. customer, cut its American corn imports by 15% in 2024-25, down to 18 million tons, after enforcing strict new GMO restrictions. Mexican millers, seeking non-GMO options, turned to Canada's traceable, GMO-free corn for tortilla and snack production. Even trucks lined up at Laredo carry Canadian grain northward, a reversal that was unthinkable just 2 years ago. Further south, Brazil has risen as a powerhouse. In 2022-23, Brazilian corn exports topped 56 million tons, overtaking the U.S.'s 41.3 million tons. By mid-2025, Brazil aims for a record 60 million tons, leveraging lower production costs and expanding acreage. Their competitive edge came from abundant rainfall and a weaker real, making their corn 10 to 15% cheaper on the world market. As U.S. prices hovered near $3.50 per bushel, Brazilian bids undercut by 30 cents to 50 cents, prompting importers in Africa and the Middle East to diversify away from America. In Europe, corn is less central than wheat, but France's production decline, down 20% in 2024, created openings that Canada sprinted into. French feed mills in Normandy contracted Canadian corn, citing reliable supplies rather than risk late barge traffic on the Seine. U.S. exporters, hamstrung by Mississippi droughts, lost ground because barges transported 20% fewer loads this year, causing delays up to 2 weeks. Each delayed shipment cost shippers an extra 25 cents per bushel, eroding profitability. Global corn trade in 2024-25 fell by 9%, the largest drop in decades, from 207.3 million to 190.5 million tons. U.S. share shrank from 26% to 23%, while Canada edged up to 3% from 2% previously. China's retreat was the most dramatic. After canceling 1.5 million tons, their annual imports plummeted to under 5 million tons, the lowest since 2018. They now rely on Brazil's 18 million tons and Canada's 2 million to fill the gap. Back home, a cascade of consequences unfolds. In Iowa, ethanol plants that consume 40% of U.S. corn cut production by 10%, idling workers and trimming capacity. Grain elevators raised storage fees by 30%, pushing farmers to pay extra to hold their crop. Illinois cooperatives complain that we're full up, with few buyers at the dock. As spring planting looms, many are debating switching acres to soybeans or sorghum, crops less affected by export bans. Policy missteps magnify these market forces. The 10% blanket tariff on imports and retaliatory duties, China's 25% on corn and Mexico's 10%, make U.S. inputs less competitive. Equipment tariffs on steel and aluminum drove up combine and planter costs by 15%, squeezing farm budgets even before the harvest. Meanwhile, U.S. port infrastructure lags. Only 80% of corn vessels arrive on time versus Canada's 95%, per Transport Canada. In Washington, proposals are emerging. A Corn Competitiveness Act to subsidize non-GMO grain, grants for deepening river channels, and fast-track approvals for grain testing labs at Gulf ports. Critics say these are too little, too late, and urge rolling back blanket tariffs altogether. Without swift action, the Corn Belt risks permanent erosion of its global standing. The tipping point is near. U.S. corn farmers, hurt by canceled orders and rising costs, face an existential choice: adapt fast or risk going under. Across the Corn Belt, communities are rallying to stem the tide. One bright spot shines in Salina, Kansas. Local co-ops, grain elevators, and farmers joined forces to launch a Heartland Export Initiative. They pooled resources to charter barges down a newly dredged stretch of the Republican River, cutting transit times by 2 days. Within a month, Canadian and Brazilian buyers took notice and booked 200,000 tons of Salina corn, proof that nimble logistics and local cooperation can turn the tide. Meanwhile, Washington is under pressure to act. Senators from Iowa and Illinois introduced the Corn Recovery Act, proposing emergency export subsidies of 10 cents per bushel for U.S. corn bound overseas, capped at 500 million bushels. The bill also calls for $500 million in federal grants to modernize on-farm grain elevators and deepen key river channels. Critics warn that subsidies mask deeper problems, but farmers argue any relief beats leaving fields unpicked. At the USDA, talks are underway to create a non-GMO incentive program, matching Canada's 25% GMO-free success. Under this plan, U.S. growers could receive $20 per acre to plant non-GMO varieties, reclaiming markets sensitive to genetic standards. Early tests in Nebraska reported a 10% premium on those kernels. If scaled region-wide, this shift could recapture up to 5 million tons of lost demand by 2026. On the tech front, drone-based pesticide application pilots, proven 90% accurate in Saskatchewan, are being trialed in Iowa, thanks to a $50 million Department of Ag grant. The goal: slash glyphosate and residue levels to below Japan's 50 parts per billion limit, matching Canada's clean farm transition success. If U.S. corn meets these strict standards, buyers in Asia may reconsider America's grain, once their first choice. Yet none of these efforts erase the hard truth. Blanket tariffs and policy missteps cost U.S. farmers market share they may never fully regain. As Brazil and Canada lock in multi-year deals, American corn risks being the world's second-best option, available but not preferred. That shift undermines livelihoods in small towns where equipment sales, feed mill jobs, and farm store revenue vanish with every lost shipment. Still, hope remains in community resilience. In Iowa City, a farmers market now hosts weekly Buy Local Corn Days, inviting chefs and consumers to sample fresh off-the-field corn roasted on site. The message: support your local grower, or watch them disappear. These grassroots campaigns, while small, send a powerful signal. American corn lives or dies by the loyalty of its own people, as much as by global markets. You just heard how corn orders were turned away and silos filled with unsold grain. Now picture that same hit moving across the plains. Mills closed, export tenders canceled, and entire markets shifting to Canada.
Tonight, many of America's farmers already feeling the pinch are worried about the possibility of more challenges.
We're going to lose another generation of farmers.
What would happen to your farm and to your business if they are all sent back to their home country?
If that would happen, I'm out of business.
Have you ever wondered why your local feed mill is awash in American wheat nobody wants? Did you notice Philippine buyers walking away from U.S. tenders in favor of Canadian grain? And what happens when a country once commanding 35% of South Korea's market slumps to just 17%? Welcome to the biggest upheaval in global wheat trade in decades. U.S. wheat shipments are being rejected, and buyers are flooding Canadian markets instead. The crisis began in the 2024-25 season, when global wheat trade volumes plunged by 9% year over year. American farmers, who exported over 25 million tons in 2023, suddenly saw their market share evaporate. In the Philippines, projected imports fell from 7.2 million metric tons to just 6.8 million, prompting Manila to scrap a 65,000-ton U.S. tender in May 2025 and replace it with 110,000 tons sourced from Canada and Australia. That one cancellation alone cost U.S. growers over $240 million in under 2 months. South Korea delivered an even more devastating blow. Long a loyal American customer, Seoul cut U.S. wheat's share from above 35% in early 2024 to below 17% by mid-2025. The tipping point was glyphosate residue. U.S. samples routinely tested at 200 to 400 parts per billion, far exceeding South Korea's new 30 parts per billion safety limit. By contrast, Canadian wheat averaged just 30 to 70 parts per billion, enough to capture over 60% of Korea's imports in 2025. Spokane's largest milling plant responded by slashing capacity 20%, and regional elevators in Washington state now report surplus stockpiles swelling by 36%. Across the Atlantic, U.S. wheat imports into the European Union plunged to a 20-year low, particularly in France, where domestic output fell 20% in 2024. Canada's share of EU wheat jumped from 7.4% in 2018 to nearly 17% in 2022, and climbed further in early 2025, thanks to CETA's streamlined customs and Canada's reputation for consistent quality. Italian pasta producers, demanding perfect semolina, imported a record 1.09 million tons of Canadian durum in just 8 months of 2022-23. Spending $534 million and relegating U.S. exports to a mere 15% market share. Mexico, once a top U.S. wheat partner under NAFTA, curtailed American imports by nearly 40% in 2025. Frustrated by inconsistent regulations, paperwork delays, and unpredictable port schedules, Mexican buyers pivoted toward Canada's reliable supply chains. They now plan to import 400,000 tons of Canadian durum in 2025 to 2026. A dramatic shift for a country so geographically close to U.S. silos. Domestically, these shifts have created a glut. March 2025, inventories reached 1.24 billion bushels, up 14% from 2024. The largest March 1st holdings since 2021. Farmers cut planted acreage to 45.35 million acres, the lowest since 2020, canceling seed orders amid bleak pricing and unsold stock. Season average farm prices slid to $5.50 per bushel, making U.S. wheat the cheapest globally, yet still failing to entice buyers deterred by delivery delays and quality concerns. This is not a temporary wobble, but a fundamental realignment. Canada ended 2024 as the world's third largest wheat exporter, with 25.6 million tons, surpassing U.S. exports of 22.7 million tons, while Australia also surged to a projected 24 million tons. As American farmers grapple with mounting storage costs and shrinking profits, they face an urgent question. How can they rebuild trust, improve compliance with stringent glyphosate standards, and reclaim lost markets before this crisis becomes irreversible? Before we dive back in, please hit the like button. Your support fuels every story we share. We're aiming for 5,000 subscribers on Global Insight, and your subscription would mean the world to us. Thank you for helping us grow. Now let's continue.
USDA says the number of wheat farms in the country has declined by more than 40% in the last 20 years.
While Canadian fields hum with exports, U.S. grain elevators echo with emptiness. Record stocks have forced farmers into drastic measures. In Kansas, storage fees doubled as silos brimmed past capacity. In South Dakota, half-harvested fields were left to rot when crews chased work elsewhere. With inventories on March 1st, 2025 at 1.24 billion bushels, up 14% year over year and the highest since 2021. Growers slashed planted acreage to 45.35 million acres for 2025, the smallest wheat footprint since 2020. What once paid the family mortgage now sells for a season low $5.50 per bushel, even as Canadian wheat commands premiums for guaranteed quality. Global competitors capitalized. Australia forecast a record 24 million ton export haul, 26% higher than the previous season, filling gaps in Asia and the Middle East that U.S. suppliers couldn't reliably meet. Meanwhile, Black Sea disruptions trimmed Russian shipments from 55.4 million tons in 2023-24 to an expected 44 to 45 million tons in 2025, and Ukraine's exports stalled at 15.5 million tons due to constrained carry-in stocks. Yet Canada and Australia seized the opportunity. offering predictable contracts and transparent logistics that U.S. exporters failed to match. Quality compliance emerged as a battleground. In early 2025, South Korea imposed a strict 30 parts per billion glyphosate limit, upending long-standing tolerances. Fully 28% of U.S. shipments required port-side retesting, delaying deliveries by weeks and souring buyer confidence. Canadian producers, under the 2023 Clean Farm Transition Program, slashed glyphosate usage by 45% across the prairies. Saskatchewan University's drone-guided application pilot achieved 90% residue control accuracy. The result, 0 retests for Canadian wheat shipments to Seoul in 2025. In the EU, French mills rejected U.S. deliveries that failed to meet carbon residue standards, newly enforced under the Green Agricultural Pact. After France's own production fell 20%, importers turned to Canada, whose exports to the EU surged by over 40% in early 2025. Italy, demanding top-tier durum for world-renowned pasta, quadrupled Canadian imports to 1.09 million tons in 2022-23. By 2025, mid-2025, Canadian durum held nearly 45% of Italy's market, forcing U.S. suppliers, once accounting for half, to the sidelines. Mexico's shift reflected more than price. In 2024, Canada's $72.5 million wheat exports there hinted at diversification. By 2025, U.S. shipments plunged 40% amid paperwork snafus and erratic inspections. Texas flour mills ceased operations, and Arizona farmers sold at 20% discounts to offload unwanted grain. Meanwhile, Canada's exports to Mexico rose 37%, buoyed by CUSMA's streamlined rules and transparent traceability that U.S. counterparts couldn't replicate. This wholesale realignment carries profound consequences. With global wheat trade forecast at 207.3 million tons in 2024-25, a record 16.8 million ton drop. Each lost sale intensifies pressure on U.S. farm incomes. Commodity analysts calculate billions in foregone revenue. Every 1 million ton loss equates to roughly $550 million at current prices. As U.S. wheat slides to 22.7 million tons in exports, behind Canada's 25.6 million and Australia's 24 million, it risks ceding permanent ground in markets long held. Farmers, facing this existential threat, discuss bold remedies, targeted government grants to retrofit grain handling infrastructure, diplomatic missions to re-establish trust with key importers, adoption of precision ag grants to elevate U.S. residue controls to Canadian levels. Yet these proposals arrive as veteran growers retire early, and younger generations pivot away from a crop whose future appears bleak. By mid-2025, the full scale of America's wheat crisis has come into sharper focus. U.S. farmers are drowning in unsold grain. Rural banks are tightening credit, and millions of bushels risk spoilage in crowded silos. Yet the fallout extends far beyond supply chains. It threatens the very resilience of agricultural communities that have powered this nation for generations. In the Great Plains, where wheat once symbolized stability, county extension offices now report a surge in drought and doom loan applications. Nebraska's largest co-op warned that without federal intervention, up to 30% of its member farms could face foreclosure by the end of the year. Kansas grain elevators, built for busy harvest seasons, now operate at just 60% throughput, turning off lights and laying off staff until demand recovers. Tractor dealers lament declining service contracts, and seed sales have fallen off a cliff as growers pause replanting decisions amid financial uncertainty. Beyond immediate losses, U.S. wheat's reputation has taken a hit. Importers in Asia and Europe now equate American wheat with unpredictability, political shifts, port congestions, and compliance hiccups. That image contrasts starkly with Canadian wheat, now synonymous with reliability and rigorous quality controls. Market analysts warn this perception gap could endure. making it far harder for U.S. suppliers to win back contracts, even if they address technical shortcomings. Despite the challenges, there are pathways to recovery if industry and policymakers act swiftly, strengthen compliance infrastructure, fund expanded testing labs at key export ports to match Canadian residue control standards, ensuring U.S. shipments clear safety checks without delay, revise trade diplomacy, launch targeted missions to re-engage major buyers, South Korea, the Philippines, Italy, with transparent supply chain commitments and flexible contract terms that rebuild trust. Incentivize adaptive production. Provide grants for precision ag equipment, GPS planters, drone sprayers, to reduce residue risk and boost consistency, narrowing the gap with Canadian yields. Enhance port efficiency. Invest in rail-to-ship logistics and digital tracking at Gulf and Pacific ports to eliminate bottlenecks that add days to shipping schedules. If implemented before the next harvest, likely within months, these measures could stem the tide of lost market share and signal to buyers that U.S. wheat can again be counted on. This wheat debacle underscores a stark lesson. In today's hyper-competitive global markets, price alone won't win contracts. Reliability, quality, and policy stability matter just as much. Canada and Australia demonstrated that foresight and long-term planning can vault a nation to the top of export rankings, even when it means outpacing a giant like the U.S. For American growers, the path forward demands concerted action, both at the farm level and in the halls of government. Without it, the fields that once symbolized American abundance risk becoming cautionary tales of missed opportunities and eroded trust. Now, before you go, you've seen tariffs empty shelves and choke exports, but that's only part of the picture. Want to see what happens when policy sparks mass layoffs and brings airports to their knees? Click the video on your screen now. 2025 U.S. Shutdown. 750,000 workers are fired. Airports collapse. Jobs and health costs soar. To find out who loses, who wins, and what it means for your town. I'll see you there.